Hey everyone, welcome to our house church weekend. So glad that you guys are here. I'm going to be kind of guiding us through our time together today. And so there's going to be basically a couple different movements, I'm going to call them that, where here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'll kind of create an idea, and we've got a couple questions that we want you to wrestle with. And then those questions will pop up, and I'm going to put about a 90-second timer on the question to give you enough time to go up and pause the TV, okay? So you'll pause it. That way, whoever is sort of in charge of your house church, they're going to be like, all right, let's gather. And they're going to set a timer related to what you guys need in your space. And so you'll process through that. And when you're done with that, you'll hit the unpause on that, and it'll take you to the next movement that we have. A couple of things I do want to make sure that you know about that are sort of, I think, on our hearts from a leadership standpoint is the Asbury thing that we canceled midweek for last week. If you're not aware, in Asbury, Kentucky, there's a university called Asbury University, also a seminary that's a part of that as well. At the university, some students, basically just a revival is broken out in that space, in that place, and it was unplanned, unscheduled, and it wasn't like they were attempting to do this. It just happened. And somebody said something to me today about it that was really interesting, is that in the context of revival, most of the time, and what you see in Scripture, is that people feel drawn to something, not often invited to those things. And right now, I think that's my heart, is I feel very drawn to that, not because it's an experience or something like that, but I think the movement of God is an attractive thing. It's a thing that is contagious. It's a thing that's infectious. It's a thing that's stirring stuff in my heart. When I got to go there, I've been twice already. If you haven't been able to go, I would tell you this is the kind of thing I would miss a practice or a game or sleep if you needed to go down. If you had to take off a half day of work to do it, I would encourage you to do this with yourself. With a friend, with family, whatever it might be. If you have more questions about it, feel free to reach out, and love to sort of fill you in on that. So first thing I want to ask you to do is this, is that I want you, last week we started this, some money. We want you to get a piece of money, paper bill, preferably. If you don't have one of those, maybe a coin. And we started this idea of looking at what's on our money, is this idea of this phrase that was added in 1957 on all paper money. Has been on there for that time. It says, "In God we trust." And so there's this idea of this tension between these two things. In our world, we trust this a lot. We trust what this represents, what it gives us, what it doesn't give us, maybe, I guess. And the tension of that phrase being printed on this thing, money, and what we believe it can do, what we believe it can't do, and the idea, in God we trust. Do I trust Him with these things? And last week I talked about that we're built in God's image and likeness, and God is a giver. But when God gives, it is not free, right? There's a cost that it comes with. Salvation is a gift from God, but it cost Him His Son. Salvation is open and available to anybody and everybody, but it cost Him His Son. And so the idea of being a giver will cost you something. The idea of being generous and being thoughtful, being courteous, all those things, they're going to cost you something. But what do you trust? And so today I want to kind of keep going in this. And so what I want to start with is this idea of, what am I thinking? And we want to have some fun with this as well. I think there's a way of thinking our way through this that might be engaging. It might force us to consider some things, and it might make us more aware of what's actually operating inside of us that might be driving some things. And so I have two questions that you guys are gonna look at here in just a moment. The first one has to do with a point of view about you, and then the other one has to do with the point of view about our family. So what I'll invite you to do in just a moment, whoever is the leader, you probably want to go ahead and grab your remote, and you're going to pause this video on this first question. That question will stay up there for about a minute, and then it will transition to the second question. So what I want to ask you to do, the first question, get in groups of, I would think, maybe 3 to 5, depending on your group size, but somewhere in that ballpark. It's going to be driven by your time frame, so that way you're not waiting on me or I'm trying to hurry through or wait, that kind of thing. You move at your own pace. But I want you to answer both of those questions, and then you're going to come back, and then we're going to process just a little bit more. All right. Hopefully that was enjoyable. I just think the nature of that question is really interesting all the time. And if I could make a request, I actually am super interested in some of your perspectives and thoughts and ideas. Is if our family had $1 million, what would you want us to do with it? What do you think would be honoring? What do you think would be helpful? What do you think would further the cause of the kingdom of God? What do you see or dream or imagine? And so, if you want to post that in the comments, or if you want to gather them as a family, that would be super cool. And you email them to me, or have somebody there probably has my information, or Kristen's or somebody's. I actually am super interested in your thoughts. If that is actually something you'd be willing to do. All right. So here's what we're going to do next. I would like us to read out of a New Testament passage called 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 3 through 17. That'll be posted here in just a moment. But I want to give context for that passage that you're about to read. So Timothy had gone to the church in Ephesus, and there were some things that were happening there. Primarily, there was some false teaching that was happening within the context of that church that was creating some challenges that Paul sends Timothy there to address. All right, and so there's a number of things. There's some issues with how people were sort of dealing with money, how people were dealing with support towards widows, how older men were actually operating from an integrity standpoint related to like alcohol. Like there's a number of things that were kind of going on. But one of the things that Paul is doing is that he's addressing the fact that, I wrote this down, is that what a person or family or community believes will shape how it lives, right? What you believe shapes how you live. What we as a family believe specifically, like about this stuff right here, what we believe about this shapes how we live. And so Paul writes this letter that Timothy reads to Ephesus, this church. And there's this tension that he's addressing because there is a holistic view that Paul is trying to get them to realign themselves to, because the church should be known for its integrity. The church should be known for its service to others. The church should be known for its devotion to Jesus, and not that we operate with a cheap grace and a false freedom, and that we leverage even the church for profitability. And that's what was happening at that moment. And so like what we believe about this stuff is shaping how we live in relationship to it. And so I'm going to ask you, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 3 through 17. Either you can gather and read that as a whole together, which might be kind of cool. I encourage you if you can do that. Or if you want to go back into your groups, have one person pull that up and read through that passage and just kind of talk briefly about it. What did you notice? What did you hear? But I've got two questions that I'm trying to create that tension. I'm like, hey, what do I believe, and how is that shaping how I relate to this stuff? And so you'll be able to pause that question. There's two of them that you'll go through. Again, you'll pause the question, gather as groups, you drive the time, and then go through the second question, and then I'll come back and we'll kind of close this thing out together. All right, guys, we're going to sort of wrap this up here in a moment. Hopefully that was some good conversation. I think those questions could be helpful as we think, man, what do I believe and how is that affecting how I'm living? Because I'm really, my deepest desire is that we would hear, what does God actually say about this stuff? And that we're actually probably given a gift that it says, in God we trust, on the money that we use every day, and the tension that should create in us. Am I known well for how I interact with this substance in my life? Do I have integrity in relationship to it? Is there a service to others that this I use to bless and to lead? Is the devotion I have to Jesus reflected in how I respond to this? It's coming and it's going. There's a couple of questions I thought might be good to finish with, but what I want you to do more than anything else is, where is God maybe speaking as you think about how you see this stuff, how it affects you, how it doesn't affect you? What does my view of money say about my relationship with Jesus? And so there's a couple questions that could be helpful and prompting, and maybe even to consider. My hope is that somebody has some stories that they can share in relationship to maybe where God has spoken about money in their life before, and that could be something that might be helpful in understanding that God actually has a voice that he wants to give us in relationship to this. The last thing I'll ask you to do is that we want to be a family that prays together and prays for one another. And so if there's anything that stirs up or any kind of prayer need that you might have right now, we'd ask you guys to pray for each other. This will take a little bit of leadership by everyone, but understand that the priesthood of all believers, the scriptures say, rest in us. And so you are as empowered as anybody else in that house that you're in. You're as empowered as me to ask the Father for anything and everything that his sons and daughters might need. So look forward to hearing some feedback and what happened in your house church. And thank you for being with us today. There's 2 more questions. So house leader, if you'll want to pause those and lead through the rest of that, and then ask folks to spend some time praying together before they exit.